everybody, it's Juleann here again with some more maternity yoga. With this section, we're going to focus on the opening sequence of the journey into power, entire sequence. So with opening, this is one of my favorite sections in regards to being pregnant. It feels really good on your hips, and let's be real, there's lots of stuff going on, shifting and moving. This can be really helpful. Now, your best friends will be the blocks, and I know I've said this quite a lot, but in this case it's really true. And I know I've talked about in other sections, specifically in first trimester and second trimester, depending on where you are, what number pregnancy this is for you, your pelvic floor can get really, really tender. So with opening, we have pigeon, well, half pigeon, double pigeon, and frog. All of these are definitely doable. We may need to shift around with them with blocks, but let's go ahead and play. So let's go with half pigeon. Now I know for myself, when I was doing half pigeon, especially when my pelvic floor was extremely tender, getting down into it was very hard and challenging. So that's when I chose to level up with the blocks. It just brought my hips up slightly, which allowed my pelvic floor to just not take all the weight and the stretch. And it felt way more comfortable and doable versus just trying to do it on the floor without any extra support. So let's go around with that, and I'll show you what has worked for me using the blocks. So when you come in from downward facing dog, you're going to go into right side half pigeon. This is where I would have a block right here, and I would place it right underneath my hip, not quite my butt, kind of like right here. And again, this is another time that you can play, move the blocks around. Now here's the other thing too. You may want to use another block and place it underneath your left leg. So with this, it just rises everything up, so your pelvic floor has a bit more support and there's not so much pressure. And then the best thing too is to have a block for your forehead. And you can just rest and keep your head on your block right here. So let's just say then, maybe everything feels amazing and you don't need the blocks. I would still make sure that you have one to rest your forehead on. And here is when, especially when you get further along and progress more within your pregnancy and your belly grows, you're gonna have to wiggle around a bit. I notice with myself, I kind of need to, before I can get truly settled, I have to wiggle around in order to get my belly in between my legs, which you'll see in just a moment. So let's play around with the right side again. So you come in here, and this is where I kind of have to play. I get my right hand and I help to open up my right hip a bit more. So you can just do a little self-assist by putting your, I kind of call it like a Lego hand, right into your hip crease, and then externally rotate it out. So that way you get a little bit more room right here for your belly to go in. You could be right here and you can just rest your forearms on the ground. If you've got two blocks, you can stack them up and you can rest your head. If you could go further, you could go right here. You can extend your arms out further and rest your head on the block. And the reason why you want to rest your head, your forehead on the block, is to keep the length and extension all throughout your back as well as your neck. When you start to rest it on the floor, because your belly is there, you kind of start to curve your neck. Doesn't feel very well. So that's half pigeon. Double pigeon, Depending on your level of flexibility, also how many blocks you have, and where your belly is, this is a pose that you can really just explore, and the sky's the limit. I'll just show you some options here. If this does not work for you, stay in half pigeon. So double pigeon is when you have both of your shins stacked on top of each other like fire logs, and your feet are hanging off the edge of your knees. You want to keep your ankles flexed, and then you want to keep your spine long and tall. This right here may be enough for you. You could also use your Lego hands again and just tuck them right into your hip crease. And again, externally rotate your thighs, which feels super yummy for me. Again, this just gives me a little bit more wiggle room if I choose to start to fold forward. And remember here, when you fold forward, you still want a long, flat spine. You're not working to round. Here's another great opportunity for blocks. I usually like to rest my hand or my forearms on the blocks. I can stay right here, or I could put my elbows and allow my forehead to just rest in my hands. So let's say your level of flexibility is not quite here, and that's completely fine. All of our bodies are so different. That's what's beautiful about yoga, is that there's so many ways to play and shift and change to make it work for you. I'm going to switch sides just so my other hip gets some love. Let's say that this is a really uncomfortable position for you. Having your blocks really important. This block is a bit taller than what a regular block is. It can be kind of fun to play with. This is where you can sit on one of your blocks depending on what height. This just raises your hips up, and this can be really helpful where it gives you more access to a hip stretch. And when you're up this high, you may be able to be right here, and this feels great. Or again, you can start to use your blocks, and you can tuck one under your left knee, one under your right knee. This feels good. Maybe the hip height is too high for you, so you can just stay on your butt. Maybe this is what your pose looks like. Again, you can use your blocks to tuck them underneath everywhere, and here is your double pigeon. But if you look, no matter what, my ankles are flexed, my heels are on the outside of my knees, my spine is still long. So if you're starting to do this, dial your pose back. You still want a long, flat spine, true north alignment. All right, let's go into frog pose. Blocks, blocks, blocks. All the colors of the rainbow. Always have the blocks. So I'm going to show you two options here with frog. Again, for myself, when my pelvic floor was super tender, frog pose was just not accessible to me. It was too intense. Now that my pelvic floor has leveled out a bit, it's much more manageable for me. Either way, you want to have some blocks at hand. And if you're practicing against the wall, it can be really helpful to put your feet against the wall. It's just another little modification. No matter what, you want to make sure that everything's at a 90 degrees. Your hips, your knees, your ankles, all at 90. You're not going in, you're not going too far out. Everything is at a 90 degree. You may stay right here. Or if this isn't too intense for your core, you get your block, you tuck it right underneath your breastbone, like right before your belly, and then you can use another block right underneath your forehead, and you can stay right here. Maybe you're into the point where being flexible enough, you could possibly come pretty far down And even though your hips are up, your belly can still kind of rest on the floor, and you can rest your forehead onto your palms. Getting out of frog is always entertaining when you're pregnant because you can't really flop forward onto your belly. So you just kind of roll around and see what works for you. Now the other option, if frog is just not working for you at that moment, is to take wide leg forward fold, a straddle position. This has felt really good for myself. So no matter where you are, again, to make sure that your ankles are flexed, your toes are pointed straight up to the sky or your ceiling. You're not rolling in, you're not rolling out. Everything is stacked right on top of each other. Even with your spine, you're not going like this, you're not going like this. You can stay straight up and down. So your wide leg forward fold may look more like this. Just go with what works for you. If this still feels really good, there's an opportunity to fold forward. And here is where the levels of blocks really come into play. Just like in double pigeon, you could rest your forearms onto your blocks. If you need some more, just like in frog, you could place one right under your breastbone and then one right underneath your forehead and extend your arms long. If you feel even more flexy, you could just go without the blocks and fold forward. Usually though, I still have one underneath my forehead to keep myself a little bit up and level so my belly has some room on the floor. And make sure that you are just, again, being mindful. You've got a lot of the loosey-goosey hormones flowing through you right now. You still want to remain safe. So you may feel like, oh, this is amazing. I can stretch even further and further and further. Just be mindful. See what your edge is. Mild tolerable discomfort, good. Searing pain, dial it back. So there you have it. That was the opening sequence. And just really take note of your breath and breathe. Focus on your hips and softening and grounding down. And if you need extra time in these poses, because they do feel so yummy, and if they do give you that much relief, know that you take all the time that you need, and if the class still is moving forward, you do you, and you do what is needed for your body at that moment in time. All right, cool. So I'll see you for the next sequence then.